beg your pardon. Aren't you Guy Haynes? My name is Bruno Anthony. Want to hear one of my ideas for a perfect murder? Two fellows meet accidentally. No connection between them at all. Never saw each other before. Each one has somebody that he'd like to get rid of. So, they swap murders. Crisscross.
I may be old-fashioned, but I thought murder was against the law.
You think my theory's okay, Guy? You like it?
Sure, Bruno, sure. Now, everything didn't go smoothly. She doesn't want the divorce.
But you sound so savage, Guy.
Sure, I sound savage. I feel savage. I'd like to break her neck. Now, who did you say this is?
Bruno, Guy. Bruno Anthony. Don't you remember? On the train. Is your name Miriam?
Right here. How did you...
Help! Somebody, help!
Guy.
Are you trying to tell me? Why, you maniac!
But Guy, you wanted it.
There seems to be no way of diplomatically breaking tragic news. It concerns your wife. She's been murdered.
Miriam murdered.
She was strangled.
You're just as much in it as I am. We planned it on the train. Crisscross.
How did you get him to do it?
He's a maniac. I met him on the train going to Metcalf, and now a lunatic wants me to kill his father. Bruno, I've decided to do what you want.
I still think it'd be wonderful to have a man love you so much he'd kill for you.
Well, then am I correct, Mr. Haynes, in assuming that you have no intention of going ahead with our arrangement?
None whatsoever.
I don't like to be double-crossed. I have a murder on my conscience, but it's not my murder, Mr. Haynes. It's yours. I'm not going to shoot you, Mr. Haynes. I'll think of something better than that. Much better.
Better keep on your toes. Something funny's going on.
Guy Haynes is taking chances I've never seen him take.
Excuse me, madam, I need your help. We're chasing a man.
Haynes, hold it!
Crisscross.
Hi, folks. My name is Barry Steelen, and this is Miss Rebecca Holland. We're here for the first time to introduce you to films which I hope we will definitely establish an interest in your mind to want to go out and see if you haven't already, and or maybe go out and rewatch if you have seen them before. Background. Why do we do this? Becky and I have been friends for several years. We met, I would say, because of a mutual love, and I'll use the word love, of movies of all natures. We don't particularly say, oh, well, we're snobbish and we only watch certain films.
Yeah, we give everything a chance.
Give everything a chance.
Yeah.
We're very...
Not discerning.
And Becky, as a little bit of introduction as to, who are these people that are invading our minds with propaganda about films. Miss Holland had a proper education, was a history major. So when any movie that involves history comes along, I will graciously bow to her education and hope that she can come up with some interesting asides if they are warranted. She is also a filmmaker. She is also an actress. She is also a producer of films. I think those are pretty solid credentials. And she also is very opinionated. I will say that quite quickly. So don't expect everything to be a love fest here as far as us both thinking that the movie that we watched and we're trying to convince you either to watch or to maybe disregard. That will happen once in a while.
That's okay. If you liked everything, what's the point?
Yep. But, Becky, what am I forgetting here about your background?
No, I think that's fine.
That's it?
Yeah,
Want to talk about me?
of course.
Thank you.
Well, Mr. Barry Steelman has a very long and interesting history in the film business. He's been in you could say, the entertainment business for over 50 years. In 1966, he started in working, or you ran it, correct?
I ran a theater down in Manchester.
Yeah, you ran the theater in Manchester, and he has worked in a variety of establishments over the years. He owned Cinema 93. It was a movie theater and also a video store at one point. He was also instrumental in the establishment of Red River Theaters, which is our local independent movie theater here in Concord. He and I go there quite a bit.
We're coming from you from New Hampshire.
Yeah. We should mention that.
Yep. So if there's an accent, which I don't think there's one that's
I don't think so, except we
prominent.
might say wicked. I say wicked a lot.
Okay.
I've heard that places me. But another really interesting thing about Barry is he worked on the film set of a film that was shot here in New Hampshire. It's an Oscar-winning film, On Golden Pond.
I did. I worked for 10 weeks on that production, and it was probably one of the highlights of my life as far as any involvement with movies is concerned. Had the opportunity to meet all the principals in front of and behind the camera. It was an experience that I'll never forget. And it also provides me with the idea that how important film can be territorially. To this day, people come to the state of New Hampshire, and one of the things I think a lot of them want to see is where On Golden Pond was filmed up in the Lakes region.
Yeah. And there's actually some interesting things going on politically right now in New Hampshire at the State House when it comes to trying to bring more films into the state, which I'm sure maybe in a later episode we'll do an on location. Yeah, because it's interesting. We've been to a few of those. But
so that's the setup.
Well, we have one last thing, Barry. We're forgetting.
Uh-oh.
Our mutual love of film has also included going about once a week to the movies and drinking beer. So you'll see us here with beer while we do these.
Okay. It's a stimulant. Maybe loosen up the vocal cords so that they will say something intelligent, hopefully.
Or not hold back on opinions.
Okay. So today, the movie that we wanted to talk to you about was a 1951 Warner Brothers release of Alfred Hitchcock directed classic, I'll put it into the classic vein, Strangers on a Train. You've never seen this?
No, I hadn't, and I had always wanted to because I've seen a few Alfred Hitchcock movies before, and every single one I've seen I really liked. So Strangers on a Train was the top of my list, and I'm really glad we saw it.
And this is probably important in Hitchcock's career because he had just made 2 or 3 films that weren't commercially successful, and he needed a little bounce as far as getting together with an audience again that was interested in what he was creating. And this was a knockout of a movie. It starred Farley Granger and Robert Walker, and these 2 men play strangers who meet on a commuter train and who, after a brief discussion about some of their background, the Walker character, whose name is Bruno, puts forth a rather decidedly unusual proposition to Guy, who is a sports figure. He's a tennis player of some repute.
But he wants to get into politics.
Yep. And he's having wife trouble.
Let's talk in here. Oh, this is cozier. Sort of like old times, isn't it, Guy?
Oh, skip it, Miriam. It's pretty late to start flirting with a discarded husband. Especially when you're going to have another man's baby.
And Mr. Robert Walker is he's got a problem with his father. Well, the proposition is by Robert Walker made that they, as strangers, could be the perfect people to perhaps commit a crime, which would eliminate the wife and eliminate the father. The Farley Granger character, the tennis player, kind of just dismisses this as rather idle chatter. The Walker character, not so.
We're coming into my station.
For example, your wife, my father. Crisscross. What? Oh, we do talk the same language, don't we?
Well, sure, Bruno. We talk the same language. Thanks for the lunch.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
He proceeds to formulate in his mind how he indeed could assist Guy and get the wife out of the picture.
Mm-hmm. And that Bruno character was so fun to watch. I love that because both the actors were good, of course. I liked both of them because I really liked the movie, but Bruno was just really interesting whenever he was on screen. It was his mannerisms, the way he dressed, and just an intensity that his character had. I really enjoyed watching.
Yeah. And sad note, Robert Walker, at that time when the movie was made, was probably 31 years old, and the film was released in June of 1951. In August, Walker dies. He's 32 years old, and it was tragic.
He was such a good actor. Not that it's not sad anyway, but
yeah.
When you think of what other films they could have done at such a young age.
Yep. And he was in the process of making another film, which was called My Son John. And he played a person that was suspected of being communist. And far enough along in the film so that it didn't have to be scrapped, but Walker passed away. And they had to use a double. And I think, if I remember the tale correctly, the director mouthed some of the dialogue that Walker's character in the film needed to really finish it, and they also used some outtakes from Strangers on a Train in order to complete the movie. Very tragic. And when you watch Strangers on a Train, I think you'll be fascinated by the performance of Mr. Walker and realize that a substantial talent was stifled at an early age.
Definitely. And there's multiple really interesting parts of the film, but there's two that really stand out to me that Barry and I have talked about a lot. And one of them is spoiler alert, the strangling of the woman, how they shot it. And Barry was explaining to me, it was really interesting how they were able to pull that off.
Well, the murder is reflected in the wife's glasses, which are removed from her head in the struggle and are lying on the ground. And in order to have this happen effectively, Hitchcock and his people created a huge set of a huge pair of glasses, so that it was something that you could indeed act out in front of and have your reflection photographed instead of dealing with something of this size, which would be, because
they weren't huge glasses,
which would be pretty difficult to do effectively.
Yeah, and something I found really interesting about that part, just from, I guess, an actor standpoint and a directing standpoint, I'm sure it was a choice on the part of Hitchcock, but so obviously you don't really see Bruno committing the act. It's reflected in those eyeglasses, but there's an opportunity later at a party where he's acting out, strangling a party guest, and you really do see his face, and he kind of relives it, the emotions on his face. So you missed out seeing how he might have reacted to it when it happened, but you're seeing him relive it later on. And I thought that was a really interesting choice to do it that way.
Now, when I nod my head, you just try to cry out, and I'll bet you can't do it. All right, now. Just wait for the nod of my head.
Alfred Hitchcock was a master of building suspenseful situations, and he definitely did a fantastic job of doing that in Strangers on a Train. The other scene that I know you're just busting to make mention of is at the climax of the movie.
Yeah, the climax takes place. So the two main characters start to fight on a carousel, and the carousel operator, I believe he gets shot. And so he hits the lever and the carousel starts going really, really, really fast. And there's two parts that Barry thinks I have an evil laugh. Do you call it evil or do you call it like sadistic? I forget what you call it.
It's definitely coming from a place that is kind of menacing.
So the carousel's going really, really fast, and the two guys are fighting, and a crowd gathers. This woman's going, my baby's on that carousel, and it just cuts to this little boy having the time of his life, just hanging on because he's whipping around. And the other part is there's this older, I guess he's a carny, he's some older worker at the fair, and he's like, I can crawl under there and stop it. He's gonna crawl underneath. And a police officer's like, no, don't do that, you'll get hurt. And the other police officer's like, you want to go under there? And he's like, he's fine, let him go. Yeah. It was just really funny to me.
Get someone to stop this thing.
I can handle it.
Hey, be careful. Stop. Well, do you want to do it yourself?
No, I guess he can make it all right.
The absolute dynamite aspect to that scene is the fact that when the actor, I believe his name is Harry Hines, a character actor who appears in a lot of films, usually very briefly, does indeed crawl underneath this structure, which is literally spinning.
It's whipping around, and it's doing this too.
Yeah, it's definitely not stable.
Yeah.
And the shot was made, and it was actually not faked. And you'll be amazed when you see that like 10 or 15 seconds of footage that probably put the elderly actor in a little bit of harm's way. And they were very fortunate that they got this terrific shot without him getting injured.
Yeah, scary.
Yeah, it's scary. Yeah, I think Hitchcock, in retrospect, said that it was something that he would never attempt to do again, put an actor in a position where he could indeed get hurt.
Mm-hmm. Well,
great movie.
Yeah, it was. I think it was great, and I'm glad I saw it.
Great movie. So we would recommend that you see this if you haven't. And if you have seen it, and it's been a while, rewatch it. I think you'll find that it still plays incredibly well.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us today.